choice A, choice B, choice C, or D. So, but at least it gives us an opportunity, including the trainer, an opportunity to be able to see where the students are at, where the issues are, so that then we end up addressing some of the issues that you will have raised in this session. I can see it's now 10. We'll just dive in. So today our trainer is Nelly Aluanga, and she's actually, yesterday when I was discussing with her about her profile, and in fact, I was so impressed, and I thought it would be good at least for you to see the kind of person that we have on board. So Nelly Aluanga has been a teacher of agriculture for a very long time, including during the previous curriculum, and she's also a NEC examiner in agriculture. She's also a trainer a teacher trainer for STEM. And she's also an author of the book that you just saw in front of you, which is a modern agriculture book that was approved by KICD, the grade 4, and she's also helping us with the grade 5. And she's also a teacher and has been a teacher for, she's telling me, around 25 years or so. So she's a teacher who has who can actually be trusted, and she also does administrative duties in the school where she's a HOD math, science, and agriculture departments. At this particular point, allow me to I'll stop sharing my screen, and Nelly, I'll just unmute her. If maybe Nelly, you can share your screen, even as I invite Frederick Sewer to say something small before we begin. Sewer?
At Oxford University Press. Just to welcome everybody to this session that is important, meant to actually
sorry, Sewe, we missed your bit. Sewe, sorry, we missed your bit. Maybe you can just begin and a bit louder.
Okay, I'm saying thank you so much, and just to welcome everybody on board. I am Frederick Sewe. I'm the publisher in charge of STEM subjects at Oxford University Press. So just to welcome everybody, thank you so much. I hope you're going to enjoy this session. It is going to be very educative, and I hope all of us benefits in one way or another. Once more, welcome.
Thanks a lot, Sewe. We hope that we'll be hearing from you as we proceed with this training. So at this particular point, we will start with our first poll before I invite Nelly to join us. So yeah, in front of you, you'll see our first poll, and the question is, in which of the following areas of the basic education curriculum framework are you most knowledgeable about? In which of the following areas of the basic educational curriculum framework are you most knowledgeable about? So we have got the mission and vision, the key pillars of education, the national goals of education, the core competencies for basic education, and there's also the I'm not familiar with the framework. Interesting. Okay. Nice. I can see a number on the core competencies. There are also quite a number who are not familiar, which is okay. And that's why we are having this training session. Okay. So maybe in the next 30 seconds. So if you're still responding. Wow, impressive. Okay. Okay. Now I'll stop the polls at this particular point so I can share with you the results. We have 81 people so far who have responded to our polls. Nelly.
Yes.
You can see the results right in front of you.
Yes.
So it looks like more people, most of our attendees today are familiar with the core competencies for basic education, but it looks like the mission and vision, there are also quite a number who are not familiar with the framework together with, the key pillars of education, but at least you can see the national goals of education, the core competencies are quite well known by our attendees today. So just to take note of that, we'll also go through the second poll, and I would like to request as many people as possible to kindly participate in this. Okay, so question 2 is, which of the following tools do you find easiest to interpret? Question 2 is, which of the following tools do you find easiest to interpret? And we have the lesson plan, we have the curriculum design, the schemes of work, and there's that where you're not familiar with the tools. Okay, interesting. Wow, the answers are coming in fast and thick. Whoa, whoa, wow. Okay, can see schemes of work. Some say lesson plan, a number not also familiar with the tools. Okay, okay. Wow. Wow. Okay. I'll stop the polls at this particular point. So if you haven't responded, it's okay. We'll be able to see the results of the rest of the team. Okay. Nelly, your work is cut out for you. Clearly, a number of the teachers today are familiar with the schemes of work and they find it easy to interpret. But then you see the lesson plan and curriculum design, and number 2 are also, it's not really quite bad if you look at it. So at this particular point, Nelly, I think it would be important for me to just let the team know that we'll be discussing about the CBC, the CBC framework and the curriculum designs and preparation of professional documents. So over to you, Nelly. Kindly take us through so that you are better acquainted with what we're discussing today.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Daisy. Good morning, everyone. Daisy, can you hear me? If you can hear me, then I know my comrades can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you, Nelly. You're quite loud and clear. Yeah.
Good morning, Sewe, Mr. Sewe, my boss. Good morning, Daisy. Good morning, walimu wenzangu. Just to invite you to this session this morning and to say welcome. I am one of you, an agriculture teacher, science teacher. So like it was introduced in the morning, I hope that we'll have a very, very interactive forum and just come out all having learned much more and better able to deliver our agriculture. So from the first polls, Daisy, I could tell that many of us are quite familiar with the national goals of education, the core competencies as is given to us by the documents from the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, KICD. But the mission and vision, the key pillars, those are areas we can dwell on. Colleagues, comrades, I know that these are things you've gone through very many times, so I'll try and be very brief and put things in very simple terms because I know education can have a lot of vocabulary so that we understand each other. So just to start with a quick background information, the KICD talks to us about the basic education curriculum framework. It is basically just a framework, a guide that helps us in our education and education delivery. So this basic education curriculum framework was developed after reform. So basically, people sat down, stakeholders sat down and thought through the education curriculum we're running as teachers, as stakeholders, and they came up with certain areas that they thought needed to be revised. And so out of these reforms, the curriculum reforms, one of the biggest recommendations that was put forward so that we have more synchronized, more productive education system was the competency-based curriculum, the CBC. So why the CBC? Again, from the KICD documents, this is just an extract that we have in our teacher's guide, Oxford, that is written by Oxford for grade 4. The competency-based curriculum from KICD, from Ministry of Education, from all the top organs that direct education, came up with the CBC just in summary because of the main thing about the CBC being that the competency-based curriculum will focus on an individual's ability to acquire competencies, skills, and values. And I'm sure you have all come across this, that we moved from an objective-based curriculum into a competency-based curriculum. So remember, colleagues, that the CBC was derived from the basic, huge model of the basic education framework. So some of the things that we know that the reforms we're talking about, and I am certain many of you are products, no offense, have gone through the old curriculum, the 844, and you will know that it was objective-based. It emphasized a lot more on competition. Now we are talking more about excellence, achieving excellence, you know, in competencies, in skills. It was full of content, memorization. The teacher was the whole prime source of knowledge. So you are the everything. And that's why I emphasize in today's meeting that I am not the source of knowledge. We are all knowledgeable. So the CBC, the teacher, is just seen as a facilitator. So we need to remember that we are not the prime source of knowledge. We just facilitate to enable learning. It was rigid. It was had very little parental engagement. It was more focused on the intellectual aspect. What does a child know? What does a child not know? And it was completely full of summative assessment, test after test, weekly test, monthly test, termly test, and it emphasized very much on teaching but not schooling. But the CBC is flexible. The parents are very, very involved. Community engagement is part of this. It aims at bringing in all the values and contemporary issues that we will be discussing. And then it aims at striking a balance between continuous assessment and the final assessments, the formative and the summative. And the emphasis is on learning. So this is the house, let me call it a house for lack of a better word, the whole model for those who say they are not comfortable in the area of mission and vision, in the area of key pillars. Just look at it very simply as our education is housed somewhere. This whole image is derived from a document from the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development. So above on the rooftop, the purple roof, there was key stakeholders who went through the old curriculum, the former 844, and came up with areas that need to be revised, need to be reviewed. And these were led, they arrived at a mission and a vision. So on the rooftop, you can see two sides of the roof, the front of the house and the side of the house. So the mission is just as simply put as you see it at the front of the house, to have every Kenyan learner become engaged, empowered, and an ethical citizen. So the vision of the basic education curriculum framework, the whole house that guides you and I in the delivery of our education, the reason why we are doing this, our main vision is so that every Kenyan child, every learner becomes engaged, they're able to connect with what they're doing in agriculture, they're able to get empowered to move to the next level, gain this knowledge, gain the skills, the attitudes, right attitudes, and then very, very important, they're out of the studying of this education system, coming down to agriculture. As we teach them, we embed, put in values that will help them to grow into very ethical, honest, truthful, and loyal citizens. So just remember the house. The mission of the basic education framework is to have every learner engaged, empowered, and to become an ethical citizen. Then on the other side of the roof is where we have the mission. So as teachers, when we are talking about this whole big education component, we have a mission. So you and I have a mission to ensure that we nurture every learner's potential. So just like in agriculture, we plant a seed, we go through the care practices, we weed, we mulch, we do all those things. This is what we are expected to do. When a learner comes to us, our mission is to nurture every learner's potential. So important to note, colleagues, is that the old system did not quite focus much on the talents, the giftings, the potential. And for this particular education system we are doing, the CBC, we has potential to learn. And our role in this mission is just to nurture, to grow them so that they bring out their talents and their giftings. And also very important to remember, it is an all-inclusive education system. So the special learners with special needs, be it physical, be it mental, be it intellectual capacity, it is all-inclusive, we nurture all of them. So just have that image of where our education is housed. Look at the front of the roof that will remind you of the mission, to engage and to have the learners engaged, empowered, and become ethical citizens. The side of the roof is the mission. As we are teaching, our role is to nurture every learner's potential. So the four corners are basically talking about the key pillars. And I noticed in the poll, some of us were not very confident with the key pillars. Again, just remember the key pillars, the blue that you can see, are just the areas that support the mission and the vision, just the way a house is supported with pillars. So under these pillars, the key pillars, we have one pillar on values, another pillar on theoretical approaches, big words, but I'll try and break them down. Another pillar on principles. Those three key pillars actually support our mission and vision. And then we have the national goals of education on the fourth pillar, which I was very happy to hear that, to see in the polls that many of us are familiar with. So I'll go straight into the pillars and just summarize through them now that we know the mission and the vision, the vision and the mission of the basic education framework. So remember the blue, we go straight into, that slide is just giving you a summary. I'm sure Oxford will share these slides with you of the vision we've talked about, the 3 E's, and the mission we've talked about. Then the next slide is on the values. And here I'll pose a question, Daisy. I have some giveaways. I have teacher's guide for grade 4 and people's books for grade 4, a few that Oxford, when you author, you normally get the author's copies. So I would really like to share some of these copies with my comrades. So there'll be a few questions and maybe we see how we can get to give away some of these things so that we all grow. So under values, being one of the key pillars that support the mission and vision of the basic education framework, values are basically standards. We all know what values are. She's of good value, she's of not so good value. These are standards that guide how an individual behaves within a given circumstance. So the learner, in our case, we are supposed to, even as we teach, as we impart skills to this learner and knowledge and values and attitudes, we're supposed to be very watchful about how they behave. So colleagues, I'm sure you, as you've been teaching agriculture and other subjects, there are certain values you've been imparting through your teaching. And I would like you to just maybe talk about some of them. So over to you, Daisy, to ask about the values.
Thank you so much, Nelly.
Yeah.
If you want to respond to this, I can see, oh, the hands are already up. I can see Jimmy and Steve. Juma, you want to tell us some of the values that you use in your agriculture lessons. So I'll allow Steve to speak first, and then I'll give you Jumia. Steve?
Hello, Daisy.
Hi, Steve.
How are you?
We are good.
Yes. Now, the values that we normally mainstream while teaching, under the new curriculum, we normally emphasize a lot on the love, So love is one of them, integrity, peace. We mention on social justice. We mention on responsibility. We mention on respect and patriotism. So the total values that we normally mainstream in our daily to-day teaching as far as the CBC is concerned are 8 values. Thank you, Daisy.
Wow. Wow. Thank you, Steve. Nelly, do you need someone else to also give the answer?
Oh, Steve has summarized everything.
Perfect.
Just the same values are actually provided in that house where our education is housed, basic education curriculum framework. They are all there, and Steve has actually got all the 8 of them. And I can attest to it because in our teacher's guide at Oxford, we still just draw those values from the KICD model. They're actually 8, and they're love, respect, peace. We want children who grow with integrity, children who become responsible, responsibility, unity, children learning to work with each other, very important in agriculture, patriotic children, patriotic citizens, and children who are conscious about social justice, just being tolerant of each other even as they work. So well done, Steve. I think, Daisy, you will take the details so that he gets to get the first takeaway teacher's guide and pupils book for grade 4. And if he already has copies, he can always share them out to other colleagues. Is that okay, Daisy?
Yes, yes.
Steve,
I'll send you my email so that then we can see how we can get you the material Nelly has promised.
Okay, and I'm sure other comrades also had all those at their fingertips, but thank you, Steve, for being the first one. So that is one of the pillars that support our mission and vision in the basic education curriculum framework, back to the house, the blue pillars that are holding the house. Then we have the theoretical approaches. They also support our mission and vision for the learner. Now, this is a big word, but if we've been to education colleges, I am sure colleagues, many of us remember the PIJ's cognitive development theory. Whether you did education 30 years ago, 10 years ago, 2 years ago, that is one of the very most common theories that we are taught in our education colleges. So just to understand, to break this down quickly, a theory is just an idea. This idea just simply explains certain observations that have been made based on very general principles. So somebody thinks through something, studies behavior, makes some observations, and comes back with statements that are actually put down as an idea. Now, this idea is meant to inform a certain practice or a certain process. So I'll give an example. For example, when we study in education about the PIJ's theory of cognitive development, in very simple terms, and I know you are all familiar with it, the theory talks about a child's intellectual capacity, that a 2-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old have different levels of understanding of content. Their brains are growing at different level. So because of that theory, that idea from PIJ, that theory actually informs the education process. So under the KICD, this is where we see the connection between the PIJ's theory and the materials that the KICD gives us as teachers. The material is separated into levels. So you have materials for grade 4, materials for grade 3, materials for grade 2. So I'm hoping that it clarifies this whole big word, theoretical approaches. Just remember, a theory is just an idea that is presented, and it's completely separate from the process. So in the case of PIJ's theory, the theory would be the theory, the idea from PIJ about intellectual cognitive development. And the practice would be the practice in education, how we separate content as we go to class to teach. Class 2, you teach different material, different content. Class 3, class 4, and going up. So we are back to our basic education framework. Please remember it had a vision at the rooftop. We are all looking towards that vision to have this learner engaged, empowered, and an ethical citizen. Then it had a mission. As you and I teach, we want to nurture every learner's potential on the side of the roof. Then this basic education framework, remember, is supported by pillars. The key pillars that some of us were not familiar with. Now we know one of the key pillars is the values, and we all know the values that we impart as we teach agriculture. The other key pillar is the theoretical approaches. So I've just given an example of Piaget's cognitive development theory. I wonder, and this might sound quite difficult depending on when you finished college, because we don't normally use theoretical approaches in our teaching, they're already embedded in the practice. I wonder if anybody would remember and would like to share any of the education theories they remember, either from college or from reading, just so that we understand that there are very many ideas that go behind to support the education model. Is there anybody, colleagues, comrades? It might be a long time ago. Even just the name of the person who put the education theory across.
I can see
Daisy?
Pauline Koki. She wants to respond. Pauline, you're now on.
Okay, hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, good morning. I wanted to share with you on attachment theory that children need to bond with the significant persons. Otherwise, if they don't get the bonding at an early age, it is going to affect their personality.
Thank
Hello?
you. Thank you.
Thanks, Pauline.
Hello,
Hi.
Daisy?
Yes, I can hear you. Would you want someone else to respond?
Yes, please. We can have another turn.
Okay, let me see. I can see John Misiko. Allow me to. John? Okay. John, you'll need to unmute yourself so that then we can hear you. Okay. Let me give someone else also as we wait for John to. So there's Mariam Tunji. I will allow you to speak. Mariam? Oh, now John, you're live. John, do you want to respond?
Yeah, you had asked us to give an example of a theory. I remember
Yes.
this one of Pavlov, the motivation theory, where you condition a rat with the ringing of the bell. Anytime the bell rings, the food drops in the cage and the rat goes and eats. So every time the bell rings, the cat will always be salivating. That's what I can remember in brief.
Oh, interesting. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Daisy.
Okay.
So thank you very much. If I can respond to the two, Pauline talked about attachment theory, where children get attached to their caregiver or whoever, the childminder or the teacher or the adult around them. Now, just to expand that and relate it to agriculture, Pauline, thank you very much. The same way, when we are teaching in the classroom, children feel us, children respond to how we treat them or not treat them. And it's not a theory that is not in agriculture at all. It completely informs our teaching practice in education and in agriculture. So feelings are very important when we are teaching, how we treat them, because they can either choose to behave in terms of attaching towards you as a teacher or disengaging. Then I think John talked about the Pavlov theory. You people are very good with memory, where the dog salivates every time it's shown the bone. Now, if I may just relate that to agriculture, it would simply mean that the way you and I come into class, the way you present yourself, if there's something you are regularly doing as a teacher of agriculture or any other subject, the children actually see that as a conditioning. For example, if you went through the 844 There are certain teachers who would walk into class and multiplication tables, either they put the rule on the table. You just see the teacher walking in, you already know how you're going to recite those tables. And if you don't recite them, what will happen? So it's very important that when we are teaching agriculture, we are very conscious that we try and avoid any habits as a teacher that will make the children become conditioned so that they can predict our behavior even before we start teaching. So thank you very much, John. And was it Pauline? Daisy?
Yes, Pauline Koki.
Yes. Yeah. So I will also add the 2 giveaways to them. Now over to guiding principles. So colleagues, we are just about to finish this model with the mission, vision, and the key pillars. The 3rd pillar is just the guiding principles. You're all very familiar with them. Just giving the learner opportunity to learn, excellence in learning, diversity and inclusion. I've put it in red and explain why in a minute. Differentiated curriculum and learning so that every learner is able to access learning. Parental empowerment and engagement, community service and learning. The reason I've put this principle of diversity and inclusion in red is just to remind us again that no learner in the CBC is supposed to be left out. Actually, the CBC from KICD, from the education content we engage with, is actually preaches to us that no child is seen as a failure. So we have to be ready to accommodate their diverse presentations and also include all of them in learning. So the 3, the mission and vision, we are now, I'm hoping, have a better understanding by now. Then the pillars, we've gone through the values, the theoretical approaches, and the guiding principles that support the mission and vision. And the last one, which I'm glad to say, the last pillar that supports mission and vision is the national goals of education. Then our house is now stable, which all of us are familiar with. The 8 national goals of education, just down the list, you know, we can read them. Foster nationalism, patriotism, promote national unity. Education should prepare the learner to play an effective and productive role in the nation, promote individual development and self-fulfillment, promote sound moral and religious values. Of course, being tolerant of each other's religion is important. Promote social equity and responsibility, promote respect, development of our rich and varied cultures, promote international consciousness and foster positive attitudes towards other nations, and attitudes towards good health and environmental protection. So back to our basic education framework again. The mission is clear now. I hope the vision is clear. The pillars that support this framework, I hope, is all clear. And then now we go on to the core competencies. And I was very pleased to see in the poll that a lot of us are very familiar with the core competencies. So if we look down at the staircase, this is what actually the competency-based curriculum is. So on the green, the staircase. So this is what we are doing in our classrooms, you and I, every day. We are making sure we develop competencies in digital literacy, imagination and creativity, critical thinking and problem solving, learning to learn, citizenship, self-efficacy, communication, and collaboration. So all those as well can be found. This is all drawn from the basic education framework of KICD, but they're also in the teacher's guide of grade 4 agriculture. Then now moving into the professional documents, this is actually within our toolkit. Just like a mechanic would go to fix anything, he'll have to carry his toolkit. When we go into our professional documents, there are certain things, now that we know what the basic education framework looks like, the mission, the vision, the pillars that support it, and the core competencies of the CBC, there are other matters that we need to also include in our toolkit of professional documents, or rather, when we're talking about the competency-based curriculum, there is the area of pertinent and contemporary issues. Now, this I'm sure you're all trained and are familiar with. The issues that are to do with our day-to-day lives, society, how we live in society, the learner is supposed to engage at a level where they're not just learning, gaining knowledge, gaining skills, but they're supposed to be very aware all the time throughout the lesson, throughout their school term, of things to do with citizenship, human rights, responsibilities through their agriculture. How do they take care of their gardens? How do they take care of their crops in the farm? How do they not, for example, injure or harm wild animals, conserving environment? So there's health education. This is supposed to be running through within the basic education framework, within the CBC. Here we have this, the awareness of HIV and AIDS. A lot has been said about this. Communicable diseases, we can't overemphasize, especially given the pandemic we are going through now. These are things we need to allow learners to talk about, to be aware of, to bring solutions to the table, to form theories, ideas on problem solving and all that. So the pertinent and contemporary issues are straightforward, but we just need to remember they're the issues that affect the child's life, the learner's life, the community, how we relate socially, life skills and values, number 3. Number 4, education for sustainable development. Here is where we talk about environmental education, very important in agriculture when we talk about soil conservation, water conservation, innovative gardening where they don't have space, but they are still using the tools in the environment to turn them into innovative gardens and grow their crops. Financial literacy, where they're selling their little seedlings, whatever it is they have grown. Then number 5, pertinent and contemporary issues that affects the learner. Learner support programs, where we have guidance and counseling, things to do with mentorship. So all these are supposed to be embedded as we teach every day. Then finally, parental engagement and community service learning. So under the CBC, we always are guided by the objectives of teaching agriculture. So of course, in lower primary, they did not do agriculture per se, but they covered environmental activities where they're grade 1, 2, 3, they familiarize themselves with the environment. So we are just building on that as agriculture teachers in grade 4. Number 2, we want to enhance their competencies, their skills. We want to grow their skills so that they can be able to continue to participate in sustainable development for our country, for their schools, for their locations, their counties. Number 3, we want to teach the learners how to maximize the use of available spaces and resources in order to practice agricultural skills that will enhance food security in the country. So as we go to class to teach agriculture, we want to grow skills, values, attitudes in our learners so that they are very conscious of the resources we have, be it water as a resource, soil as a resource. How do we teach them to be very cognizant, very aware of these resources, and how can they use them so that we do not lack food, so that everybody, every home, every little homestead is able to have something to put on their table from what the learners are learning in class and more, depending on their level. Then finally, we teach agriculture so that we can enhance competencies in the preparation for the agriculture they're going to do in lower secondary, because they start it in grade 4. They'll go studying agriculture grade 4, 5, 6. They cross over to high school in grade 7. So we need to lay very strong foundations. So the objectives are quite straightforward, but things we need to, you and I need to keep going back to so that we remind ourselves what is the objective of me teaching this learner? What do I want them to gain out of agriculture as a subject? Now, straight into professional documents. So if you remember the housing that housed our basic education curriculum framework given to us from the Kenya KICD, we had the mission and the vision up there. We had the 4 pillars, the pillars that support the mission and vision of the educational framework. Then we had the core competencies on the staircase, that the areas that we are supposed to make sure that the learners are developing skills, values, attitudes in those core competencies. Now, when you talk about a professional document, it's just like I mentioned that mechanic will make sure he has his toolbox and is ready to go and fix whatever it is that he has been called to fix. So for you and I as a teacher or as teachers, our toolbox is usually in print, it's written. So the KICD has what we call the curriculum designs. And I saw from the second poll, some of us were not very familiar with the curriculum designs. I don't know, I know schools operate differently. Sometimes the core material that comes from KICD that gives you the whole plan, the whole framework of how agriculture is going to be taught the whole year is basically housed or stationed in a particular office, and then maybe the head of department or whoever runs the agriculture in your school will now just go in there into this huge document that gives you the whole year's areas for study, programs of study, and then draw out the scheme of work for term 1, term 2, and term 3. But important to note, colleagues, is that this curriculum design is accessible to any of us. If you go to the KICD platform on the homepage and just ask for the designs according to the volumes, you look for agriculture, and agriculture can be found, and I think it's grade 4, volume 3. And if you go into that page, when you open it, it will give you the whole curriculum areas, all the programs of study that we are supposed to cover from January to the end of the year in grade 4. So this is just a sample of what you would find in that page. This is what actually guides where we get our schemes of work from to draw out the termly plans from the whole curriculum design. So important to note are the key, if you can just see have a look at the blue, the subtopics, or call them topical areas, that will be the key features you will look at, and you'll know that you're now on the big document that will give you everything you're supposed to cover the whole year, topic by topic. So ideally, it would have a strand, which would be something we used to call many years ago like the main topic. For example, the strand here is conserving our environment. I'm sure you're familiar with the word strand. Then it would have the sub-strand. Long time ago, we used to call it the subtopic. Then it would have specific learning outcomes. And these are some of the differences that have come out of the CBC. We talk less of learning objectives. We talk more of outcomes. By the end of this substrand, the learner should be able to, achieve the following: A, B, C, D. Then we are actually given in this design the suggested learning experiences, and they're just suggested. So the KICD guides us and tells us some of the experiences. For example, here in pairs, learners to brainstorm and share experiences on small wild animals, and it goes on. So they just suggest to us some of the activities that the children can partake in so that they actually begin to grow their core competencies. For example, if they're brainstorming, what core competencies coming out of there? If they're watching a video clip, listening to a resource person, we can be talking digital literacy competencies here and more, but we'll dwell more on that tomorrow. So for today, this document was just to show all of us that there's the main curriculum design that has these key features: the strand, the substrand, the specific learning outcomes, the suggested learning experiences, what the learners will engage in. And then there's always a key question called the key inquiry question that we should our minds from our toolkit. And it's, for example, here they're asking, the key inquiry question is, what are the small wild animals that destroy crops and domestic animals? So when we get into the lesson planning, those are the questions as you're planning, you must keep always at the back of your mind, so that through our teaching and learning process within the minutes you are given to teach agriculture, we are making sure that you and I as a teacher are answering to a specific question. So it's usually quite a detailed document. It has all those features. Then it has another feature that we are now comfortable, all of us with, I suppose, the core competencies to be developed. It has the PCIs, pertinent and contemporary issues. It has the values that were listed to us very, very clearly. So in our teaching of agriculture, those values need to be imparted. Then it has links to other subjects. So this is another real admirable thing about the CBC, is that even as an agriculture teacher, I'm not teaching in my own island. I'm not in my own space. So I'm supposed to relate with the science and technology people, find out what they are teaching, and see how we can relate the content and work together. Then it has the other feature is suggested community service learning activities. This year we talked about service, how the learners will engage the immediate community. It can be school, it can be the village, the homestead areas they come from. It can broaden to a wider community, and the community here can even broaden to the national and international community. Sometimes it's just a question of global awareness. That's also community engagement. Then it also has assessment rubrics. So this is where you actually, after you have done your lesson delivery, the learners have engaged, you have engaged them, they have engaged, you have empowered them, they have observed all the ethics, you are now supposed to assess them. And we no longer talk about children who are passing or failing. We talk about children who are working towards meeting certain expectations. So there are expectations in the syllabus, expectations in the design, and we are talking about exceeding expectations, meeting, approaching expectations, or working below expectations. Some people even say working towards expectations. So colleagues, this is just the document in the poll that some people signed up and said they are not familiar with. This is what we would call a curriculum design. We get it from the KICD. It is the main document that is given to us in our schools, or we access it from KICD, and we use it now to roll out our other tool, other documents that is going to go into the termly planning. Then from the document for the termly planning, we roll out another tool that is going to guide us week by week, lesson by lesson as we teach. So we are still on the professional documents, and a lot of people confirmed that they are quite familiar with lesson plans, schemes of work, and so, but are not very familiar with lesson plans. So colleagues over here, I have two extracts or experts of two professional documents. One is that one that you see, a piece of a document that has strand, substrand, specific learning outcomes, suggested learning experiences, key inquiry questions. So this is just part of a big document. Then the one with color of gray and darkish color, and I'm hoping that we are all able to perceive color. In case anybody is not able to see color, this other document has week, lesson, strand, substrand, specific learning outcomes, suggested learning experience, key inquiry question, resources and references, assessment and remarks. So Daisy, I would like to get back to you and ask my colleagues whether they can tell the difference between the two documents, and perhaps give us names. Just try to name each of the documents. Over to you, Daisy.
Okay, thanks a lot, Nelly. So there are two documents before you, and I can see some have already started lifting up their hands. Let me now this time go to the chat box, see if anyone has got a response on if they can identify the first document at the top and the one at the bottom. So I can see Juliana Murage has said design. I don't know which one is design.
It's okay.
Okay.
As
Please
long
just
as
say.
you can just name.
Yeah. Okay.
What the other is that?
Linda says the first one is the curriculum design. Agnes says the first one is the schedule. Oops. Wow, these answers are coming fast and thick. The top one is the curriculum design, Eric Nyabala. Dominic says the first document is the agriculture curriculum design. Florence says the first the scheme of work and the second one is the lesson plan. Pauline says the top is the design, the second is the scheme of work. Annie Ngugi says curriculum design and the second one is the scheme of work. Career Festers also says the first one is the curriculum design and the second one is the lesson plan.
Okay, thank you very much, Daisy. Those responses are all very, very good and correct. And I had a response where a colleague talked about a schedule. I know that schools call them different terms. Some call them schedules. The first one, we are all correct, is actually the big document we get from KICD that gives us the programs of study, what we're going to study the whole year. So the first piece, the one on top, is part of a curriculum design. And the second piece is actually lesson plan. Sorry, a scheme of work. So the scheme of work, of course, now gives us the content that we are going to cover. Say most schools plan per term. So what I would just like us to remember or take note of here is that the key features in the curriculum design, the big document, will still appear in our scheme of work when we are planning for the term. So for example, under A, you have the strand or the main topic. So in the scheme of work, you still again have a strand. Of course, your scheme of work will guide you on which week you're in. Are you on the first week of the term? This is lesson 2, but the strand, don't worry about the content here. I wasn't matching the content. We'll do more of that tomorrow. Week 1, lesson 2, you pick your strand from the main curriculum design, put it in the scheme of work. The sub-strand B comes under your scheme of work. The specific learning outcomes in the design will be the specific learning outcomes in your scheme of work. So C goes with C. Suggested learning experiences will be the same ones in the scheme of work. You draw them from the curriculum design into your scheme of work. Then, of course, you have your key inquiry questions. You just pick them and put them in there, although these days we are being asked to modify them, put in a bit of your own creativity and think about the learner. Then you have the resources you're going to use, the references which you're going to refer to. You have the assessment column. What are you wanting to see achieved in terms of skills, knowledge, and attitudes as you assess the learners? Then you have the remarks column. So well done. The top document is the big curriculum design. Then you come and break it down into the termly schemes of work. So finally, your other professional document is your lesson plan. Now, in your lesson plan, this is what guides you lesson by lesson. So it has this particular one. I know schools have different templates they use for lesson plans, but this is what we have in the teacher's guide, as given in the teacher's guide in the Modern Agriculture for grade 4 from Oxford. So it basically just gives you the data for school, area you're learning, the grade or class you're teaching, the date, the time, and the role, the number in the register, the number of kids you're teaching. So again, just take note, colleagues, that it will have similar features to your scheme of work. So you've come from curriculum design into your scheme of work. Now you're having lesson by lesson guide with a strand, sub-strand, specific learning outcomes, key inquiry questions, core competencies, okay, which we are familiar with, PCIs, values, the resources you'll be teaching with, and then how you're organizing your learning. These are more details, where and how to conduct the lesson. Then of course, now we go into lesson development. So I don't want to dwell much on this. It was just an introduction today of our professional documents. And I hope I've met our objectives for the session today, where we started with the CBC framework. We did a background of the basic education framework. We looked at the vision, the mission, the key pillars, core competencies. Then we dwelt on the competency-based curriculum. Then we came to part 2, where we looked at our professional teaching documents. So thank you very much, Daisy. I'd like to end it there for today.
Okay, thanks a lot, Nelly, for that. So there's a question from Eric Nyabala, and he's asking, how should you classify a mango fruit? Is it a living thing or a non-living thing? I'll also unmute Sewe, so in case he wants to respond. Nelly?
Okay, is Sewe taking a turn, or I can do it?
Okay, fine. I
Sewe
can
is
take
taking.
it.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, an interesting question. A mango really is a living thing from basic science. I don't know. Maybe the the teacher had something else behind it. If he can let us know.
Yeah, if I can just
Pretty straight, yeah.
Yeah, if I can just add to that, it also depends on where the teacher, my colleague, is coming from, because there are characteristics of living things in science, which is related to agriculture. They breathe, they respire, they feed, they grow, they reproduce. So anything that has gone through that cycle, doesn't matter the stage at which it is in. The mango fruit was once on a tree that had nutrients, it was growing, it was respiring. So yes, it would be classified. If you look at the characteristics of living things, it would be classified as a living thing.
Thanks, Nelly. There's also another question from Restuta Mwikamba. She asks, are the theories good in learning, especially with CBC, considering it conditions the learner?
Please ask it again, Daisy.
So Restuta Mwikamba asks, are the theories good in learning, especially with CBC, considering it conditions the learner?
Okay, the theories are normally not connected to what we are teaching every day. These are things ideas that have been discussed long before coming up with a curriculum. What should it look like? Which class should learn how much, how deep? So the theories actually are not directly related to our teaching and learning, but they inform our process of teaching and learning. So like, for example, the Pavlov theory, where the dog was being conditioned, every time it sees a bone, it salivates. That theory just helps us as teachers to be careful about having certain habits, if you know about that theory, avoiding habits that will condition children in the wrong way, or at all even condition children. Just let them have a free learning environment. So we shouldn't worry too much about the theories. They somehow come in through our teaching. They've been discussed by the curriculum planners as they make the documents.
Okay, so so I will also, there's a question which I'd like to address from Pauline Koki. So she talks about the 4 pillars or the 3 pillars, and she mentioned that the 3 pillars with the national goals on the roof. So Pauline, a quick question, a quick response to that is that we have indeed the 3 pillars of education, which is the values, the theoretical approaches, and the guiding principle. The house which we showed has got the 4, which also is the national goals of education, and this is basically the goals and the reason for CBC or this particular education system. So then there's another last question which I'd like to, so Susan Mutonya asks, explain more on the learner support program. I'm not too sure if you understand the question. Maybe she wants to clarify, explain more on the learner support program.
Yeah, Susan could clarify more on, expand a bit.
Let me try and
she
see if I can get her
can.
on board. Looks like she dropped. I can see her. Okay. So I think it's already 11, and at this particular point, I'd like to stop there. I can see a number of people are asking about the Kiswahili session certificates. So we have given teachers up to the end of today for those who are needed the certificates for the Kiswahili session to kindly confirm. There's an email that has been sent to you together with the link and the for all the material we used last week. So please respond to that email. We only have up to today. So that then it makes it easy for us to do the batch processing. I think for the first one, I can see there's still some teachers requesting for that. So I just wanted to let you know it becomes a bit difficult if we have responses done in different days. So that's why we are requesting all of you to kindly, as early as possible, if you participated in the Kiswahili training, please respond to our email. Only those certificates which, only those people who have confirmed they need the certificates by end of today will receive them at least by the end of this week, beginning next week. For those teachers who had responded in our first session, the main CBC training, we've already sent you certificates for those who responded early. For the second batch, you'll be getting them this week. And also for this particular session, we'll also have a certificate for it if you have attended. So the goodness with Zoom is that we're able to see how many people have been able to join and how long they've been able to join throughout the training. So we kindly request that you please stay put. And if you've not been able to join for one reason or the other, you can always watch our videos on YouTube. At this particular point, I'd like to say thank you so much, Nelly. For those who have questions for tomorrow, I'm sure we're not able to answer everything today. Please send them through so that then we can start sifting them early enough and then ensure that we respond as tomorrow is our last day. Thank you and have a very good day. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.